After a long day, it's kind of nice to see people who are still willing to engage in learning. I know you. How do I know you?
Yes, you did.
How do I know you, though?
Black box, right?
Yes, that's what it is. We work out together. We look very different with our clothes on. I mean, these types of clothes on. Well, I don't know about that one. Okay. So I like to start with just kind of like breaking down that that's in the room, like, oh, is this one going to be good or not? And so I think it's always good to talk about food. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to stand up, and I'd like you to not talk to the person immediately next to you, but I'd like you to reach out, shake somebody's hand, or elbow bump or fist bump, and tell them what you had for lunch and if it was good. Go. Hi, my name is, and I had Schlotzsky's for lunch. Okay, y'all can talk.
Hello. My name is Anna. I had some vegetable soup my husband made earlier.
Have a good chance for lunch.
How about you?
We'll probably get food after this.
Yes, I'm looking forward to this.
Seafood always does it. Okay, we're heading back. All right. So my name is Beth McGill, and they call me Dr. B because B stands for a lot of things. Like beautiful. No. And sometimes B stands for really bad, or I don't know. But I am a professor of pedagogy, which means the art of teaching, and actually pedagogy, the art of teaching youth. I'm also a study of andragogy, which is the art of teaching adults. And I work with future educators that work in schools and communities to get people to change their behaviors, their health behaviors primarily, which sounds like it's pretty easy, but health behaviors are pretty complex, so it's a little bit more difficult than people think. And what I've discovered is in order to really get people to engage or to get people to really uptake and learn from you, you got to know about it. You got to know the characteristics that they come with. Ideally, you develop a relationship. You want to get an emotional hook or connection with them first. And so that will really shape your effectiveness as educators. But, and I would love to tell you that this content that I'm going to bring to you about millennials and generational perspectives on learning is my original research. It's not. I actually went to a conference several years ago, and I went to a presentation put on by Holly Moses. See, I've acknowledged them, and Monica Webb, where she brought up this idea that millennials, which most of you in this room are, learn differently, okay, than the generations before them. And so, but millennials have to live in society and learn from the generations before and before that. And there's a big disconnect between that baby boomer generation versus that Generation X generation versus the millennials versus the Z's and the other letters that are coming. And what we find is each generation has a set of characteristics that are fairly typical of that generation. And if you're familiar with them, it's going to help you manipulate and work through the system of academia more effectively. Because if you think about it, if when we're looking at the baby boomer generation, okay, these are going to be your older people, probably people your grandparents' age. Those people currently in the university are in the positions of power. These are your Dr. Sharps. These are your deans primarily, okay? And so when you guys are ready to go out and begin to negotiate your contracts for your jobs, it might be pretty important to know what perspective is that dean coming from? How do I get more bang for my buck? So although the connection between what we're doing, it may seem a little bit far off, hang with me. Try to learn a little bit about each generation. Try to learn at least 2 things of characteristics about each generation. And then as we're working through, think about how can I apply that? How can I use that information as a future academician? One of the things that I've found that helps with this presentation, as I have continued to do more study on it, since I did find it quite interesting when I went to the conference, is if I can think of a person who fits in that mold as I'm hearing about those characteristics, I'm like, oh yeah, that was just like that. So what I'd like to do is I've provided a piece of paper for you. I'm going to borrow yours. It looks like this. It has a nice title. Well, that's the wrong side. Go to this side. The side without the, I thought, oh, it's the side with the chart. Well, they both have charts. So we're going to go to the side without a title. And in this column on the right, what we're going to do, and I'll tell you when we get there, is we're going to record somebody who you know who fits in that age group. So like for me, my baby boomer, I would probably write down my father in that case. Or, you know, in your case, it's probably your grandparent, because, you know, I'm considerably older than you are, okay? So you might want to write down somebody you personally know, and then I think that'll help you make the connections better. But I would also write down somebody you're currently engaged with here at the university that fits in that age group, and see if those connections can be made as well. This is not for a grade, because sometimes we just learn for the sake of learning, and I'm not going to take it up, so there's no right or wrong, but I think it might help you make those connections a little bit better. So this is titled, a big old awesome title that can get lots of hits when you're researching. By the way, make your title long on your dissertation so you get lots of hits on it. Millennials as professionals, methodologies to meet the needs of cross generations of professionals. That's what we're talking about today. By the time you leave here today, what I think you're going to be able to do is be able to give me characteristics of the different generations between the baby boomers, the Generation X, the millennials, and then the future generation, the Gen Zs that are coming. And then also, at the tail end, and I'm going to work as fast as I can, I'm going to try to walk you through, as instructors, when you're delivering your presentations, maybe when you're in that job application, or when you go to that interview, and you got that room full of boomers, what should that look like? What should that presentation look like? Or when you're in your classroom and you're working with your millennials, what should that encounter look like to be more effective? So that's what we're going to try to do. And if there's time, I have some scenarios, which I doubt we're going to have time, but I do have some, where we can kind of read through and try to figure out what generation they are and what the problem is and how we might solve that. So just in general, when you hear a lot of talk about millennials, what are some words that are used to describe millennials? No, that's not them. Yes?
Words I don't like, but entitled.
Entitled. Very much you'll hear entitled, okay? And there's a reason for that, okay? There's a reason for why you get that entitlement. And what you're going to find is the generational characteristics are pretty much a direct result of what was happening societal-wise, what was going on in our country at the time that really shapes and forms. What about self-absorbed, egocentric? This is a generation of the selfies, you know. But actually, all of those negative words, and that's part of where this presentation came from, was the frustration that I feel and that my colleagues felt with millennials getting a bad rap. In reality, your generation is the most embracing of diversity, okay? Your generation tends to be more selfless than any of the generations, the predecessors. You're the biggest generation. I'm assuming most of y'all are into that, so I'm going to lump them all. If you're not, you're probably just a small outlier. And so you bring a lot to the table. So when we look at the negative press about the millennials, is that they're the me generation, and it's all about me and what can you do for me. But in reality, that's not really actually what our learners are in our classroom. The learners in our classroom are very, very much socially conscious, even at the expense of themselves to benefit others. They tend to be more tolerant of different ideas, millennials do. They tend to be more community-minded and taking care of one another. And they also put tremendous value on relationships and families. And there's a reason for that, which we'll find as we go through. So it's not such a bad rap. Okay, so I think this is so funny. This is the shopping bag that you would get if you went to a store that sells athletic clothing. And they've made millions of dollars based on this mindset of community building. Does anybody recognize that bag? It's a Lululemon bag. Okay, so we're talking paying $100 for a pair of tights that you could get at Sam's for $15. And yet, now granted, it's good quality stuff, and I wear it too. But what they're selling is not so much the product, but they're selling the relationship. And that's what millennials care about. And as a consequence, they're making millions of dollars. But look at their slogans. Friends are more important than money. Meaning, you know, money's a good thing and it's great to have. And that's kind of the mindset that millennials have. We need it to get the things done that we need to do. But really, it's about the friends. Creativity is maximized when you're living in the moment. Meaning, enjoy where you are each and every day. Look, I love this one. Your outlook on life is a direct reflection of how much you like yourself. Loving me, taking care of me, and being confident in who I am. I like this one too. A daily hit of athletic-induced endorphins gives you the power to make a better decision, helps you be at peace with yourself, and offsets your stress. So a lot of taking care of oneself, so that I can be available to enjoy life. What a great outlook. See, you millennials never experienced war or the consequences of war, but your predecessors did, and it very, very much shaped their perspectives and their characteristics, which indirectly shaped and got you to this point. So that's kind of what I'm going to do. I'm going to kind of tell you the story of how that happened. So we'll go, in order for you to understand why you're the way you are, possibly, we kind of need to look at why the generations before you were the way they were. And so here's the chart that I gave you, just kind of making sure, recapping. So ideally, you've written down by this point somebody who falls into each of these characteristics, and hopefully you've written down an example of someone at the academic level. If you haven't finished, there'll be time, so when I get to the Gen X slide, take a minute and add somebody else. When I get to the millennial slide, you can write your own name down. You can write down your students' names, because a lot of those are there. And if you're not a millennial, if you fall into one of these other categories, think about, just in general, this is your training with millennials, even if you're not in that generation. I do want to clarify this. These age ranges that you see, 1946 to 1964 for the baby boomers, the literature is fluid about that. No one's really locked down that at 1964 you are no longer, at 65 you are no longer a baby boomer and you are now a Generation X. That's really not how it works. So you'll see several different age ranges there, because we really haven't locked down on what that range is. And because it's problematic, and I'll give you a good example. I was born in 1963, and I'm 52 years old, okay. So I'm an oldie, but when I look at these characteristics, because I'm on that cusp, I have some of these qualities of a baby boomer, but most of the time, I'm gonna fall into that Gen X group. So it's very fluid when you're on the edges, when you're on the outliers. So don't just think just because I wasn't born in 65, I'm not a Gen X and won't have any of those characteristics. So just kind of, that's kind of how you'll work the chart. All right, so this right here is what we call a word art. And the way this works is you type in a paragraph or information and you talk about the topic at hand, and what it will do is it will produce themes. It's kind of like qualitative data. And so when we write information about baby boomers, the main themes that come up are work-centric. The bigger the words are, the more influential that term was in the information about it. And so work-centric, very, very work-driven. They are independent, very hardworking, very passionate, competitive. And so there's reasons why, and a lot of it has to do with the social dynamic. So let's kind of back up for a minute and think about what was going on in our country at the time that the youth, baby boomers, were your age, when they were the youth, okay? So we're in the 40s to the 60s. We're at the tail end of World War II. We've just previously had World War I. So we have had back-to-back world wars. Now, at this time, the mindset was, if everybody does their part and everybody follows the rules and everybody does what they're supposed to do, then we're all going to do well together. And then when we went to war, there was a communal sense in our country that we, in the United States, that we've got to band together and everybody's got to do their part. You got to do your part, work as hard as you can. You got to do your part, work as hard as you can. And if you work hard, and you work hard, and you work hard, we are all together going to be successful. But it's critically important that you as an individual work hard and get your job done and do it to the best of your abilities. And if for some reason he didn't get his job, help him out too. And so they became a very focused generation that was worried about taking care of business. And they did it out of this strong commitment that if I don't do my part, I'm going to let everybody else down and we're going to fail. We're going to lose the war. And that's going to be tragic. And that's going to shape a lot of the things that happen. So really what happens is as they begin to work hard like that and take care of their business, they become very independent and they're very hard workers. They give them a task, they're going to get it done. They're going to get it done even at the expense of sacrificing themselves. What? I missed Aunt Sarah's wedding? Well, I had a project due. I couldn't go. A millennial generation says, no, the wedding is much more important than the project because this is people, okay? And so you can see that contradiction when you're the boss, when your boss is that boomer and you're that millennial and you're going, well, I got to go to Aunt Sarah's wedding. And they don't get it. Well, it's just a wedding. They'll still be married after the fact, okay? And so we get that contradiction there that can sometimes cause problems. They're very committed to their jobs. They're very, very committed to their work. They're very committed to doing a good job. Strong work ethic and a lot of strong sense of loyalty. These are the people, y'all. You ask them where have you worked and you went in their lifetime, and they'll say, Texas A&M University, all 35 years. Okay. I mean, they have a lot of sense of, millennials will have multiple jobs. Usually will have multiple jobs at the same time. Okay, because what they want to do is they want to diversify. They want to be able to meet a lot of different people's needs because they have that strong need for people. And whereas the baby boomers are, I need to do my job well, and I need to function in the company, and as long as I'm doing my job well in the company and functioning, the company's going to do well. We're all going to be successful. It was an all-for-one mentality. Still is. That's the way that they function. Okay? And so not a lot of tolerance for when people don't take care of their stuff. They're very, boomers are very optimistic. They don't get a pessimistic perspective of baby boomers because they're very optimistic. They work on the mindset, if I want to do it, I'm going to do it. I just got to work hard to make it happen. So you don't tell a baby boomer, no, you can't do that, because that's just the fuel that they need to keep them going. So when you're working with your baby boomer generations, you kind of want to work from the perspective of what do we need to do to achieve this goal. Instead of identifying barriers, you want to come at a boomer with, here's the barrier, but here's the solution I thought of. This is something we can try. So they don't like that problem solving where you can't take care of yourself. Very much of that works in the minds, pull up your bootstraps and get on the horse, let's go, and take care of your business. Boomers tend to work from the mindset that you don't just get things because you want them. You have to earn what you get. You have to come to the table with evidence that you deserve what you're getting. So when you go in to negotiate your contracts, you better think about because odds are pretty good the person that you're going to negotiate that contract with is going to be a boomer. And so you're going to need to come to the table with, here are my publications, here are my presentations, here's my scholarly record, here are my grants. All those things become very, very important for your negotiations because the boomers are going to be going, prove to me that you deserve to have this position. just things to think about that maybe not maybe intuitively you knew, but now we have real evidence that shows that. A lot of independence, a lot of personal growth. Another thing that's very different about the baby boomer generation. Let me go back to a minute. So we came out of this is the generation who either were involved in the war, their parents were involved in the war, or there was something related to the war effort. And when the World War II was over and all of our soldiers returned home, came back, there were no jobs. There were not jobs to get. And so, because of that, to be employed was a huge status quo. That was a big deal if you had a job. And so and hence that's what fed that loyalty to the company, because you had a job. And because there were so many people looking for jobs and there weren't a lot of jobs out there to get, you did what you had to do to keep that job, which is why they would put in those long hours and they would skip Aunt Sally's wedding. But it was that loyalty and that was fostered out of the lack of jobs being available. But it shaped the way that they developed their work ethic. As a consequence, when you were employed, you needed to look the part. And so you needed to walk the walk and talk the talk and dress the dress. And so when you talk about business casual to a baby boomer, well, for a baby boomer male, that's a suit and a belt and a starched shirt and polished shoes, but maybe an open collar, no tie. Okay? That's a very far cry from what business casual is to a millennial. Describe business casual for a millennial.
Collared shirt.
Khakis. What else?
A collared shirt.
A collared shirt. Okay, just a little bit different perspective. Some of y'all are in business casual. I mean, you have colored jeans. That's what we consider business casual these days in this generation. Is it wrong? No. It's just a different perspective. But it's a perspective we ought to understand. And so this professionalism in dress. One thing that's interesting though, well, baby boomers, they don't like conflict. They're very much authoritarian in their authoritative in their approach, where it's this way because these are the rules and we're going to follow the rules, and there's no talking about it. They don't like to break the rules. They're rule followers for sure. And the reason they don't want to break the rules is because the rules protect them from having to deal with conflict. They don't like conflict. Conflict is a sign that somebody didn't do their job right, and possibly them, which is a negative reflection on them. And for a generation that takes pride in their work, and this is where they get their gratification, conflict says you didn't do your job well. So your boomers don't do well with sitting down and talking about the problems, and these are the pros and this is the cons. They just want to take it and fix it and be on your way. Okay? So that's kind of a different mindset than the generation after them. They tend to be very argumentative, my way or the highway, which is not always such a bad thing. Here's a huge difference between millennials and boomers. Boomers live to work. They get up in the morning, the first thing they think about is work. All day long they work, and when they go home, guess what they're thinking about? Work. Okay? They live to work because work was a status symbol, it was a status quo. A lot of employment loyalty, a lot of a following of the rules and respect for the rules, because the rules, if you follow the rules, you don't have to deal with confrontation. And then, as far as technology goes, I find this hilarious. You have to understand a typewriter. Do y'all even know what a typewriter is? Okay. A typewriter was technology for a baby boomer. Okay. The whiteout, the paper. Y'all know what whiteout is? It's the white liquid. It smells good, but don't smell that because that's huffing. Don't do that. Where you'd put it on when you'd correct over, and then they came up with tape that automated. I mean, that was their technology. And so what you're going to see with your boomers is they don't really embrace technology. They don't understand why it dominates your life, why you'd rather lose an arm than your phone. And so that's kind of a disconnect. They fight technology typically, and if they do use it, they use it very ineffectively. They tend to use word for the word processing, okay? And Excel spreadsheet, no way, okay, way too much. One search engine. When you search, how many engines do you have open typically? How many screens do you have? You got 2 going and 1 going down here, yeah. Whereas here we got 1 screen and it's because what? Yeah, there we go. He's got 5 open right now. Okay? So it's not wrong, it's just different. Okay, so knowing that, that's who you're probably going to interview with. Now, let's move fast forward to Generation X, and this is the one kind of I fall into. And I'm gonna go to my notes pretty heavy right now on this because I want you to hear this the way that it needs to be said. So I might even do a little bit of reading to you. So this social construct, the war, had implications on Generation X. Because Generation X, the people that were young and childbearing at this time, these are probably your parents. If you haven't written somebody down, you might want to do that right now. They grew up with these workaholic folks, workaholic parents, who followed all the rules and self-sacrificed to save the country from war, and I'll be dadgum if we're not back in and about to go to the Vietnam War. And this generation was fed up. No way. I have already lost too much of my own family. They lost uncles and brothers and husbands due to World War II. And this youth, y'all's age group at this time said, forget it. I'm tired of the status quo. Look, they all followed it. We're right back in a war situation again. And so what you saw here in the 60s was tremendous rebellion. No way, heck no, I'm not going to go. There were draft dodgers. This was a time of tremendous, if there were rules, this group said, whatever the rule says, I'm doing the opposite. If you said the sky is blue, they said, oh, no, it's any color but blue. Tremendous rebellion. A lot of exploration with drugs. Also, to complicate things, this is the time when we had the invention of the birth control pill. So now we have a huge ability for women to now be sexually active without consequence of pregnancy. And so a lot of rebellion, a lot of sexual exploration, drug exploration, with very little regard for the consequences of those actions. Matter of fact, you'd see the mantra, if it feels good, you should. And multiple times, with very little concern for what the outcome of that might be. Now, this is important to know because this generation are the parents, these rebellious people are the parents of our Generation X's. Now, what we see happen though, the culture of rebellion contributed to the rise in divorce rates, along with the rebellious nature of their childbearing youth. And it shaped a lot of the characteristics that we see in Generation X. So my parents were of this rebellious group that sex, drugs, rock and roll, and all that kind of stuff. And my parents were divorced. And so what we saw, over 50% of children were raised in single-parent households. The days of kids coming home from school and mom being there with cookies and milk didn't happen for this generation. And so this generation, whose parents did that before, knew they were getting cheated. They knew they weren't getting what they should be having in the way of that home life, which caused a lot of discontent. What we saw happening here, this is the first generation of what we call latchkey children. So these children are kids that, and I was one of these. This latchkey thing, what this was, is you were going to go home from school that day, and nobody was going to be there to let you in. The doors were going to be locked. And we were so young, we could barely keep up with our code. But you had to have that key to get back in the house. And so what they did is they took that key and they put it on a chain, and all the kids wore keys to their house around their neck. And they would call us latchkey kids, and we'd get home and we'd get in the door, and that's how we let ourselves in. Now, this was really, so this child comes home by themselves, left to take care of themselves. Get your own snack, get your homework done, take care of stuff, because mom or dad, whomever they're living with. Most of the time it was mom, because that was the time period where females always got the children. So mom comes home, been working all day, she's tired, I need you to take care of that. So what we get is our Gen X's very, very independent, very self-sufficient, very egocentric, all about me. It's I take care of me, you take care of you, and we'll all be good. And if what I do impacts what you do, I don't care, because it's really just about me. So when you're working with someone who's from this generation, maybe you're trying to negotiate a contract, or maybe you're trying to negotiate who's going to have lead authorship, you better talk to them from the perspective of what's in it for them. How will they benefit best? Because that's where they're coming from. They've been self-sufficient, they've had to take care of themselves, and so that's where they, where their opinions reside. Very selfish generation, and I use the word selfish not in a negative way, it's just, it was a self-preservation. It's how they took care of themselves. This generation also, what we see happen though, is because this generation, these Xers, did have to go without, did have to sacrifice and not have all the niceties. Their children, which are y'all, the millennials, and I'm gonna put myself in there because this is exactly what happened in my family. Because I went without so much as a child, and I can recall being hungry, y'all. My mother was a single mom, and we didn't have a lot of fun. There were days that we didn't eat, and I can remember saying, I will never let my children be without. To the point that I would self-sacrifice to make sure that my children have what they need. And so what we see now is your parents, or the Gen Xers, worked very, very hard to keep that broken home from happening. They didn't want divorce. If you look at divorce rates among the generation prior to the boomers and prior to the Generation X's, they tend to stay together. They have a strong desire to make sure that the needs of their children are met because theirs weren't. And so you guys were given lots of things. You guys, if you wanted it and your parents wanted you to have it, even at the risk of credit card debt going into it, because they didn't want you to do without, because they had to. Now this isn't true. The things that I'm telling you are not true of every single family. These are just trends that we see. And so they tend to not be afraid of credit card debt, but they do have this, they had this concern for making sure that their kids grew up with having two parents and having everything that they needed. But because the Gen Xers did do that as a child, it's such a contradiction. They're high into credit card debt, but they also have big annuities, and they save a lot of money for that rainy day. So they'll carry a credit card debt but have thousands of dollars in the bank that they could have paid that off with. But they might need this someday. They're in that self-preservation mode, always having a backup plan to take care of themselves because they've had to take care of themselves all along. These are the kind of learners who want to work independently. They want you to give them the problem, give them the parameters that they need, give me the information that I need, and let me fix it myself. I don't need a team. I don't need to talk with other people. I don't need to bounce around ideas. Just let me do it myself. Okay? And we'll have these still in our classrooms. And then also, because they were very much into taking care of themselves, they became very good at multitasking, doing multiple things at the same time. And because they modeled that, your generation is even better at it. Because you saw your parents, most of you, multitask, you tend to be even more efficient with doing the washing machine and cooking the dinner and downloading that article and doing multiple things at the same time because you've observationally learned that multitasking piece. Also, our Generation Xers, they tend to resist the rules. Whereas our boomers wanted those rules. Remember, these Gen X's came out of parents who were rebellious of the rules, and so our Gen Xers were taught that rules are not a good thing. Rules are a way that people try to manipulate you and make you do stuff that you don't want to do, thus sacrificing your independence. And so there tends to be a resistance of rules, a mistrust of organization. You won't see your Gen Xers get involved in a lot of groups and organizations like you will the millennials, because they feel like they want something from me, and the Gen X's are, I just got to take care of myself. So it changes the way people function and the way people learn. As far as the PC is, as far as the technology is concerned, they did come further along. You remember this: the computer was developed in their lifetime. The first computer that they ever were exposed to took 4 rooms in a building, okay? And so this personal computer handheld, this is a long way. So your Gen Xers, they play with computers and they get them because they have been introduced in their lifetime, but they're very, very skeptical of it. They don't trust it. So typically what you'll see is your Gen Xers. These are going to be like your deans, the people that you're applying with, your department head, your division chairs. They're going to have a paper copy to back things up. So when you go in for your interview, yes, I emailed you an electronic copy, but here's a paper copy as well. Because this group doesn't trust it. I might not be able to find it someday. I might not be able to get back to it. So they want a paper copy. Different. Do you want paper? Do y'all like paper? No, y'all don't give me paper. I don't deal with paper. Because it's right there on my computer. I can get it later. But this one, they didn't trust the computer. Because when computers were first built, if you hit the wrong button, you could delete all the data. 2 strokes and it was all gone. So they became very frightened and mistrusting. Better have a backup copy. Which brings us to the millennials, which most of you are. When we look at millennials, very social. Lot of words related to using technology and being socially connected through social media. And so there's a lot of focus there. They are considered the overindulgent, coddled, entitled, need of instant gratification generation. Now, let's think about why that is. So, the parents, remember those parents, those Gen X parents who didn't have that intact home and had to be self-sufficient and didn't want their children to suffer and not have everything that they wanted to have, everything that they ever needed. And so, when a child wanted something, as a parent, I wasn't able to have that. Yes, baby, you can have it. And so, what we see is your generation is not real materialistic, because you don't need to be. Your Gen X, your parent, very materialistic because they didn't have stuff. Or when you did get stuff, it was status quo. But your generation, more so, is not as materialistic because if you wanted things, you just got it. The parents would charge you. But whereas your parents were highly subjective to media campaigns and television and marketing strategies, you guys have grown up with that, and so you tend to be more immune. You don't buy into having that Mercedes-Benz because it's a Mercedes-Benz. A car is a car is a car to you. Now, is a Mercedes nice? Well, yeah. But is it necessary? No. But your Gen X's, that's a big deal for them, that status quo. So the mindset is a little bit different. So this coddled, overindulgent, entitled thing, those are negative words, but it's because that's the way you were raised, to have what you needed to have. And so it's kind of an expectation for you guys, which the generation before you, the several generations before you, didn't get that. So when we look at you and you have everything and appear to be not appreciative of it, it makes them think, well, they're coddled and overindulgent and overly entitled. Now, here's one good thing that your folks did for you. You were raised with the ability, a tremendous amount of autonomy to make your own choices. And your parents set you up in situations where they let you try things and you got to pick what you wanted to do, which helped with your creativity. But what happened is we had what we call helicopter parents. And so we wanted you to get out there, we wanted you to try things, but we didn't want you to fail. And so when you tried things and maybe you weren't successful with it, we would come back in and pick up the pieces and fix it for you. Okay? That's that overindulged piece, because we wanted you to experience everything that was good. We didn't want you to suffer those heartache types of things. And so this overprotection, don't let them experience negative things, resulted in a generation that is very adventuresome, you guys, willing to take risks and chances because you've had the opportunities to make those choices, but needs that reinforcement from where the parents were following behind, making sure you did okay with it. So when we're looking at millennials, one of the best pieces of information I can give you today with the students in your classroom that are millennials, give them a model. They want to see what's it supposed to look like. Because this generation had their parents going, no, 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 don't do it that way. No, 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 don't do it that way. It won't be right. And so what we see is a generation that's a little bit afraid to do it wrong. They want to know, well, what are the rules? What are the parameters? What does it have to contain? What do I have to do so that it will be right? Because they don't want to fail, because they didn't really get to experience that failure because of this helicopter generation. Now, here's the deal. They want the model. They want to see what it's supposed to look like, but they don't want to do it that way. They just want to see what it's supposed to look like. Because they did have that autonomy to choose for themselves and decide how they wanted to go about doing it. So they like to look at the model and go, oh, no, but we're going to do this because this is better. Oh, my gosh, is that awesome? That's where we get new creative ideas. When people are okay with not doing it the way the rigid rules said, like the boomers. So this is a good thing in that we get that they believe they can make a difference, and they do because they're willing to take risks and try things because they always have. As far as the community mindedness of, I'm so far off my papers, I don't even know where I am anymore. The community mindedness, the relationships are a priority. This is the generation that all played organized intramural types of sports with one another because our streets were not safe, so we couldn't send children out to play by themselves, so parents had to arrange play dates, and parents had to go and be there and watch over them while they were playing to keep them safe. And so this big sense of community and let's have fun together, fostering the relationships. So this is why that relationship piece becomes so important, because the Gen X's went around making sure that you were fitting in and being able to be with other people and involved in relationships. And a consequence of that is that the millennials tend to be very highly connected to their parents. How many of you have talked to your parents this week? Raise up. Talk to my parents this week. Okay? I will tell you, my father brought me to Texas A&M University back in the 80s, wherever I came, dropped me off at McFadden Hall in August, and I talked to him again in December. And that's how it was, because he was a boomer. Okay? And so it's just different. Y'all are much more connected with your families. Oh my God, isn't that a great thing to have that social support? So, you know, there's pros and cons with everything, but we want to kind of keep this in mind as we're working with our students. So know this, you're millennials, you like to rewrite the rules. Give me the rule, let me take a look at it, I can make it better. And that's a good thing. You tend to be multitaskers because you learned that from your parents, and you tend to be better for it, better at it. You assume technology. It's been here all of your life. You're what we call digital natives. You've had technology all of your life. So to go without technology is very foreign to you. So And this is important to recognize as future faculty, because what you're dealing with is a generation of students who, if they want to know some information, Siri, find, Google, get. They don't need you to get information. They have it. In my generation, when I came to school here, you went to class and you listened to that professor lecture for 50 minutes or however long it was, and you wrote down every single word they said, because that was your source of information, and you couldn't get it anywhere else than from that professor. So everybody went to class, because if you didn't go to class, you weren't going to get it. And so, and the textbooks were archaic. That was where the knowledge was. Today, we are not, as professors, we are not the source of information anymore. We're the conduit to connect them to. You need this information and you need this information, and we show them how to put it together. Which is really a better way to learn, because we don't have to spend a lot of our time giving them facts, because they can go get that from Google or Siri or whoever else, credible source, please, no Bob's webpage, okay? No Wikipedia. Which helps us understand why in our classrooms we need to not be the orator of information, but we need to give them what they need so that they can apply. And I promise you, your generation and the generations after you are going to do great things, because we are letting them take all this information and do something with it. So your millennials tend to be tech savvy, have portable, strong work ethic. They work really, really hard, but they work on their own time. So whereas your baby boomers and even your Gen X's, 8-5, you're going to work 8-5, and you guys come strolling into campus at 9:30 with your Starbucks, and your baby boomer or Gen X supervisor says, late to work, but doesn't ever think that you've probably been up since 4 o'clock working on your paper or whatever you were working on, or you were up all hours of the night, because your work line, the millennials have a tremendous work ethic, but you like to work when you want to work. And if there's an opportunity to be in relationship, that's going to be first. Because unlike the boomers who live to work, you guys get it. You work to live. I work so that I can do the things that I want to live life. Such a better mentality. You guys are so much further along. It's awesome. So, and you demand these flexible work schedules. That's probably why you guys are in academia, because you like to do your own thing. And that's a little bit different. And then our Gen Z, so the people that are coming after you. What do we know about them? They are the first generation who has always had instant access. So what I was talking to you about before, that lecture thing, is not going to work for Gen Zs. We have got to change. And this is really important to y'all, because what you are seeing modeled, this that I'm doing right now, standing up and lecturing and telling you all this information, this is old school. This is not the way we go about doing things, or the way you need to be going about doing things in the future. They're going to be the most diverse generation to date. They're going to grow up with highly sophisticated media, lots of computer involvement. They're going to be even more internet savvy than you are. So you better keep up. So this is what the millennials want, and this is what Gen Y that's coming next is going to want. So I just gave you a whole lot of information. Whereas boomers and X's would be satisfied with what you just got. Millennials need this. Well, show me, what does that mean? So what I want you to do is I want you to pair up with somebody next to you, turn your chart over, and on this side of the chart, which I have one, on this side of the chart, I've given you, oh, this is the answers, so don't look. These are the answers, don't look. I've given you some characters, I should go to the slide, that'll help. I've given you, this is business attire. Let's see how well you've mastered the content that you've got. So business attire, business casual, how will they dress? I've done the first one for you. A baby boomer will be dressed very high end. The Gen X's tend to be low end. Why? Because that's anti the establishment, okay? And then millennials, whatever feels good. We're going to be whatever's comfortable. So here are your choices. and then we're going to filter them into the box. There are times where the Gen X and the Millennials overlink, like here and here, so there aren't but one set of choices. So with your partner, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to figure out what goes in what box. Let's take about 3 minutes and pick about 2 or 3 of them and process. But you got to work with somebody. Get a partner. Get a partner. Turn behind. I'm going to stop you in the interest of time because I'm really close and I really want to get to the next part. But I want to make a point right now. So about 10 minutes ago, I saw about 7 people just completely checked out because your generation doesn't tolerate listening to a 50-minute lecture. Bad faux pas on my part. But look what happened when I introduced the activity where you take the information and apply. And you talk with somebody next to you. Do you see how the content all of a sudden comes back alive? This is what your students need. What we call this in pedagogy is input when you do that lecture piece, and output when you give them some kind of application piece. When you do this piece, this is where we can really check and we can really solidify, did they get the concept? Do they understand it enough that they can do something with it? This, or something like this, some kind of output, helps you assess as they go along, are they really getting this information? Here's the guideline though. The average attention span of a college student, now, and of all people, college students have the best attention span because y'all are in that mode of training all the time, 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, I don't care how good they are, you're going to check out. Now, you'll come back, but you're going to miss some things in between. So if that's the average attention span, should we be having 50-minute lectures? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So what we need to do, and I challenge you to do this, is could you split your lecture up? Because we do need to lecture, we need to give them the content. But could you lecture for 15 minutes or so and input, and then create some kind of activity, some kind of little question answer, even if it's discussed amongst yourself, break that information up for a few minutes, then come back in and lecture for 15 more with another output. We call that input, output, input, output, input, output. And that's what a lesson cycle should look like. It shouldn't be input, 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 output. And what we typically see is input, input, day 1, input, input, day 2, input, input, day 3, input, day 4, output, day 5 on the exam. Okay? Completely against what good teaching tells us to do. Okay? So I'm going to go fast. Here's the answers because y'all are also the generator who want to check what you're right. So I'm going to put this up at the end so you can check yourself. But I want to fly through just the different generations and what they like and what they don't. And I'm going to go really, really fast. Your baby boomers, they want to be lectured to. They want to go to the workshop and they want to be told what to think. They want the facilitator to have all the information and be an expert. And if they're not, they are not credible. So they will not take that information away. So you better know your stuff and you better know it well. And you better present it in lecture style when you're working with boomers. So when you go to that job interview and you're doing that research presentation, you better bring it. You better bring it. You better bring it lecture style. You better good data support what you're saying. They like books, manuals, PowerPoints, case studies. They like to solve the problem. They like to work hard to solve the problem themselves. They hate role playing. This is that touchy-feely type of stuff. And whatever you do, don't tell them that they're wrong because they're going to be argumentative and they don't, because that's a reflection that they didn't do a good job. Those are your boomers. For your Gen X's, they like to learn through exploring. So these are the ones. Remember, these are the ones that were the latchkey kids. They came home, they did it all by themselves. So they want to take things apart, lick it, feel it, touch it, taste it, and put it back together. These are your kinesthetic types of learners. They like to have fun while they're learning. They want to be entertained because they were so alone for so long that they thrive on that entertainment piece. They want to be coached. Show me how to do it and then let me do it myself. Because they've been doing everything for themselves for so long. They want interaction. They like discussion groups because that's that piece. They like the role play. They love games. And they like headings and bullets. They don't want to read. Boomers like to read. These like bullets. Give me just the high points. Give me just what I need so I can do it by myself. Hate being micromanaged. These are the kind of people who don't want that rubric that says, if you don't use APA, it's going to be wrong. That frustrates these types of learners. But we should still use APA. Millennials, their preference, bring in some technology. How many of you know what Kahoot is? Ever heard of Kahoot? Kahoot is a phenomenal, super easy way to let students bring out their phones and participate and let you ask them questions. And it's a game, and it's a time thing, and you have to get in and they earn points. And it's really easy to do, and your students will thrive in it. I had a presentation yesterday, and they brought in the Kahoot, and every person in the room was involved in playing. So bring in the technology. Know this, doing something with it is more important to them than knowing about it. Because if I want to know, Siri, get that for me. I don't need you. I need you to show me what I can do with what you're telling me. Where can I go with this? How's it going to take me to the next level? So doing is more important than knowing. They prefer playing games and using digital media. They have a very low boredom threshold. If you don't get in there and you're not engaging with it, they're going to shut down and they'll go to their own little world. One of the best recommendations I can give you for a millennial, use a picture over words every time. If you can put a picture there instead of the words, they will stay with you. Because they have to figure out, well, what does that picture mean in relationship to what are you talking about? So it holds their interest a little bit better. They like the trial and error approach. A lot of times they don't even want the instructions. They just want to try it. If you're going to put together a bicycle, how many of you will get out the instructions and read all the instructions first? Raise up. You're going to read the instructions first. How many of you will look at the picture and put the bike together? Okay, that's me too. And then you'll go, okay, this is what we call a cognitivist learner. Cognitivist is going to read all the instructions and know all about it and then put the bike together. Behaviorists, which is the other rest of us, most of us, are going to go, I can do that from the picture, and we put it all together and we go, oh look, there's that chain. Wonder when that should have gone in. And then we go back to the directions and we go, oh, right here. But you know what? That's the information that we need. That's the information that's relevant. And so that's the one that sticks with us most because that's where we were short. So when you have your behaviorist learner, which are most of your millennials, they want to trial and error, and then they want to go learn what they need to learn to make things work. That's a different approach. It's a very different approach. What they don't like lecture. Sorry. So, best practices for the students that are in your classrooms today. Here's the best recommendations I can give for you is this list. Tell them that what you want them to learn. Today we're going to talk about this, this, and this, and I expect you to be able to do this, this, and this from it.